I used my retirement fund to pay off my child's debt and lost their trust anyway. I didn't plan to give it all away. That wasn't the dream when I worked overtime in my 50s or when I skipped vacations to grow the little nest egg I'd been building. Retirement, to me, wasn't about luxury, it was about breathing room. About finally not looking over my shoulder, wondering if there'd be enough. About maybe fixing the porch swing, growing tomatoes, and sitting in the quiet without guilt. But love doesn't wait for convenience. It doesn't check your bank balance before it breaks your heart. And when my child called me, voice low, words tangled with shame, I didn't think like a retiree. I thought like a parent. They needed help. Real help, not just advice or a kind word. They needed a way out of a debt they couldn't carry anymore. I saw it eating them alive, the worry, the weight, the silence. And so, I stepped in. I emptied the account I had spent decades building. I didn't do it with conditions. I didn't make a speech. I just did what I thought any parent would do when faced with the choice between money and their child's well-being. Thought it would bring us closer. I thought they'd feel safe again, seen again. I thought this act, this enormous, terrifying, beautiful act would be understood for what it was, love in its rawest form. But it didn't work that way. Instead of gratitude, I got distance. Instead of warmth, I felt walls going up between us. And somewhere in the middle of my sacrifice, I became the enemy in a story I didn't know I was in. I lost more than my retirement fund. I lost trust. Theirs, maybe even mine. This isn't a story about regret. It's not a warning. It's something harder to name. A truth that sits with a lot of us who gave everything we had and still couldn't fix what we hoped to. So if you've ever poured yourself into someone you love and watched them pull away, if you've ever done the right thing, ended up misunderstood, then maybe this story is for you. Not to change what's already happened, but to remind you, you're not alone. And maybe, just maybe, there's a way to find peace, even without a thank you. The call came on a Thursday evening. I remember because it was pasta night. I just boiled the water and turned down the radio. Their name lit up on my phone, and for a second, I smiled. It had been a while since we talked, really talked. But the voice on the other end wasn't the one I remembered. It was smaller, worn thin. They didn't ask me for money, not directly. They danced around it, the way people do when shame has its hands around their throat. Words like tight spot and just temporary floated through the conversation. I asked a few questions, soft ones. I didn't want to push. I could hear the weight of it in their pauses. Something wasn't just tight, it was broken. And then I made a choice that it wasn't. A dramatic moment. There was no trembling hand over the transfer button. Just a quiet, steady decision. If I could lift this burden off their back, I would. I'd worked hard for that money, yes. But it had always been for something bigger than me. What good is a safety net if you're the only one standing on it? I didn't tell them at first. I called the bank, shuffled accounts, signed forms, and when I finally told them it was done, that the debt was cleared, they cried. And I cried too. Not just out of relief, but out of a deep, aching hope that this act would heal more than just finances. That it might be the thread that stitched us back together. For a while, I thought it might work. There were more calls, more updates. A gentleness returned to their voice. And I held on to that as proof that love, even when uninvited, still had the power to save. But what I didn't see, what I couldn't have known, was that by stepping in, I had also stepped over a line they had drawn in their heart. One I didn't even know existed. I used to think money was just money, that it was practical, impersonal, that once the bill was paid, the weight would lift and we'd all move on. But I've learned since then that money carries ghosts of pride, of failure, of fear. And when you try to save someone from it, you risk waking every single one. At first, there was gratitude. I saw it in their eyes, heard it in their voice. But something began to shift, slowly. Conversations shortened. Messages came less often. And when we did talk, it was as if they were speaking from the other side of a glass wall. I tried not to panic. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they were just adjusting to their new normal. But deep down, I knew something had fractured. Then one day, in the middle of a casual chat, they said something I'll never forget. "You didn't have to do that. I would have figured it out." I didn't know what to say. I had thought I was giving a gift, a lifeline. But in their mind, maybe I'd taken something instead. Their dignity, their sense of control. Maybe they felt exposed, like their struggle had been turned into a charity case. I hadn't meant it that way, not at all. But intentions don't always translate. I thought the debt was numbers, dollars, a balance sheet. But it turns out there was an emotional debt too, one I didn't mean to create, but somehow did. They couldn't repay it, and they didn't want to owe it. Not to me, not like this. And I started to realize that while I was trying to fix things, they were trying to feel strong. And my help, no matter how lovingly given, may have made them feel weak instead. Sometimes love speaks too loudly in a room where someone is already whispering their worth. And even the most well-meaning rescue can sound like a vote of no confidence. When you imagine stepping in to help someone you love, you imagine relief, hugs, a return to closeness. You don't imagine silence. You don't imagine them pulling back like you've crossed a line you didn't see. But that's what happened. Little things started to sting. Jokes about me taking over. Dismissive comments about how some people can just throw money at a problem. I laughed them off at first, but each one left a mark. A bruise in the trust I thought I was building. And then came the real blow. One conversation where they finally let it all out. The anger, the guilt, the feeling that I had made a decision for them, not with them. That by swooping in, I had taken away their chance to solve it themselves. That I had, in their words, made them feel like a child again. I was stunned, heartbroken, even. I wanted to scream, but I only did it because I love you. Because I couldn't watch you drown, but I didn't. I just listened. Or at least, I tried to. And then, they stopped calling altogether. You think when you give everything you have, you earn a place in someone's gratitude. But life doesn't work that way. People don't always respond how we hope. Sometimes your rescue makes them feel rescued from themselves, and that's a kind of humiliation love never meant to deliver. I thought I'd be the hero in this story. The parent who stepped in at just the right time. The one who helped rebuild their life. But somehow, I became the villain in a story they never wanted written. And the hardest part wasn't the money. It was losing the one thing I thought would grow stronger from this, our trust. I waited a long time for the phone to ring. Not just any call, a specific one. The kind that starts with, "I've been thinking," and ends with, "I'm sorry." I imagined it over and over. Then realizing what I gave up, what it cost. Me, not just in dollars, but in trust. I thought maybe they'd finally understand that I wasn't trying to take control. I was just trying to keep them from falling. But the call never came. And at some point, I had to ask myself a question I never expected to face so late in life. Can you forgive someone who doesn't think they hurt you? It took me time, more than I want to admit. I went through all the stages: denial, anger, sadness. I thought of writing letters I'd never send. I even rehearsed conversations in my head, filled with the kind of emotional clarity that real life rarely allows. But none of that changed anything. They were still silent. I was still hurt. So I started small. I took walks without my phone. I stopped checking for updates I knew wouldn't come. I made tea in the morning and sat quietly with the questions I used to run from. Was I wrong? Did I go too far? Did I make it worse? Eventually, the questions stopped needing answers. Not because I figured them out, but because I learned to live beside them. They became part of my story, not the whole of it. I joined a local book club. I reconnected with an old friend I hadn't seen since before my spouse passed. I learned to laugh in rooms where no apology had been spoken. I planted new flowers in the yard. Started a journal. Spent an afternoon reorganizing photos from a life filled with both joy and mistakes, and I let myself smile at both. And slowly, I stopped measuring my peace by someone else's acknowledgement. I stopped needing closure from someone who wasn't ready to give it. I gave it to myself. I forgave them, not as a gift to them, but as a way to stop carrying the bitterness that was never mine to hold in the first place. I stopped trying to rewrite the past and started writing my own ending. One with dignity, one with softness, one where I could still love them, but also love myself enough to let go. I know now that love isn't always understood in the moment, that sometimes the biggest sacrifices go unrecognized and the deepest intentions get misread. But that doesn't mean they were wrong. It just means they were human. If you've ever given more than you should have, if you've ever loved someone in a way they didn't know how to receive, if you've ever waited for an apology that never came, I see you. And I want you to know this. Your love still counts. Your effort still matters. You don't need a thank you to validate what came from the most honest part of you. We all want to be the hero. We all want to be remembered for the good we tried to do. But sometimes, the legacy we leave isn't about the people we saved. It's about the person we became when they didn't turn back. I don't regret using my retirement fund. I don't regret stepping in. I don't even regret being misunderstood. Because I know my heart. I know I acted from love. And in the end, that's the only peace I need. So to every parent, grandparent, or caregiver out there still waiting, still hoping, still hurting, you are not alone. You are not foolish for loving deeply. And you are not weak for feeling wounded when that love is met with silence. Keep loving anyway. Keep living anyway. And when the moment comes when no one says, thank you, say it to yourself, loud enough that your own soul hears it, because you deserve that much. Always have.